Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So for this video, guys, we're going to be making some more PrizePicks content, specifically with the NFL. Just like we did last week with Super Wildcard Weekend, we did some PrizePicks and I kind of had each matchup have its own parlay. So that's what I'm going to be doing again. So for each of the 4 divisional games, I'm going to create a parlay. And I did a couple 2-leg parlays and 3-leg parlays for the games last week. I think I'm gonna do a 3-leg parlay for each of the 4 games. Obviously, you can organize these picks into whatever parlay you like, but for the divisional round, I'm just gonna have each game have its own parlay. Definitely comment your opinions, guys. Love to hear your opinions on the PrizePicks for this NFL playoff weekend. So without further ado, guys, here are some of my favorite PrizePicks for the divisional round this weekend. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first game, which is Texans and Ravens. Now, just like last week, I'm going to once again go with CJ Stroud to go over his passing yards. So this is 238.5 this week. Now, he's gotten this 3 out of the last 5 games. The last 2 games, though, specifically, he's kind of on a heater, and you don't want to doubt CJ Stroud, especially after what he did last week against the Browns defense. I had him going over because I knew in the playoffs, it would be pretty likely that the Texans rely on their best weapon in CJ Stroud to pass the ball. Obviously, the Ravens are a great defense, probably the best defense in the entire league. But in this game, I think they're going to need CJ Stroud, whether it's volume from playing in a come-from-behind game script, or if they're going to try to pull off this upset and win, I think CJ Stroud needs to pass the ball plenty because he is their #1 option, obviously. If it ain't broke, if CJ Stroud could go over against the Cleveland Browns, this guy's clearly unfazed by the playoff pressure. I'm going to go with him to once again go over against the Ravens in what should be a very entertaining game. And from one quarterback in that game to the other, I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson to also go over his passing yards, which is 228.5. You can see in 3 of his last 5, he's also gone over. And just like CJ Stroud, his last 2 games, he went well over, and against 2 good opponents, obviously. Those last 2 weeks kind of earned him the MVP. Look, Lamar Jackson is going to do everything to win this game. His playoff kind of reputation is on the line here, and I think the Texans, with their pass defense not being as good as their rush defense, and it's not exactly a great pass defense overall, I think Lamar Jackson should not have an issue going over, or at least I think he will be going over his 228.5. I think this could be more of a pass-heavy script, and I think both QBs are going to show out. It's not like the weather's terrible besides the fact that it's freezing, but there's no snow, rain, anything extreme that would alter, wind, anything that would alter the passing. So those 2, I'm going to go over with the 2 quarterbacks, and then Nico Collins. Nico Collins is playing so well right now. Last week he went over, I think actually his last 3 weeks he went over, his last 3 weeks he went over his receiving total. He's averaging over 80 his last 5, but just look at the last 3 games. He went over. Look at that game against Indy with 195. He was great against Cleveland with 96 receiving yards. Same with CJ Stroud. I bet on these 2 guys last week. They both went over, so I'm going to do it again because they did it against one great AFC North defense. So I think that gives me more confidence that maybe they can do it again against another tough AFC North defense. So the next game is Packers and 49ers. Now, last week I bet on Jordan Love to go over his passing yards, and he did against the Cowboys. So I'm going to once again go with him to go over his passing total. This week it's 251.5. And even though the 49ers have an elite defense, their passing defense is ranked 13th in terms of passing yards allowed versus their rushing defense, which is top 3 or 4, I believe. So their passing defense is not quite as elite as their rushing defense. And look at Jordan Love. Look how well he's played. 4 of his last 5, he's gone over this total. He's absolutely rolling right now. I wouldn't bet against him at this point. He had 272 last week on the road in Dallas in that upset win, that shocker, that thrashing of the Dallas Cowboys. And then he went way over with the 316 against Chicago. He went over against Minnesota. So right now, Jordan Love is playing terrific football. Maybe been the best quarterback in the NFL the second half of the season. So I think he will once again go over his 251.5. And he might need to if they're behind, obviously, in a winner-go-home playoff game, obviously, against the 49ers. He's going to need to bring a really good effort if they want to compete in this game and try to pull off the upset in Levi's Stadium. And for the 49ers side, I'm going to go with Christian McCaffrey. Among their many dangerous weapons, Christian McCaffrey, I like him to go over 100 and, let's see if I can find it. It was 130.5 rushing plus receiving yards, so yards from scrimmage, of course, rushing and receiving total. Yeah, 4 of his last 5 games, he went over. And then that last game against Washington, I think he briefly was hurt, but he came back, so I don't believe he played that full game. Christian McCaffrey is playing fantastic football. He was the best running back in the sport. He's going to get MVP votes. And not to mention, the Packers have the 28th ranked rushing defense in terms of yards allowed. And Christian McCaffrey will obviously be a key fixture in the 49ers game plan. I think Christian McCaffrey will go over 130.5 total scrimmage yards. That brings us to the third leg of our parlay for this game and the second Niner. I thought about a few different pass catchers of theirs, but I ultimately ended up going with George Kittle to go over his 54.5 receiving yards. And the reason why is because he's a little bit up and down in terms of his yards output. So 3 of his last 5 he's gone over, but it seems like when he has a slightly down game, maybe an under in the PrizePicks category, an under game, he goes for an over usually the week after, just like he went with 54 and then had the 126 the week after. Last game against Washington, he had 29. In the playoffs, I think George Kittle can get over 54.5 receiving yards. I mean, he's an all-pro tight end this year for the second time. George Kittle at home, super energized for the playoffs. We know the high level of energy George Kittle brings to the football field. I think he goes over his 54.5 receiving yards. So now we move on to the Sunday games, starting with Bucks and Lions. I'm noticing that I'm going with a lot of the overs that worked for me last week. I'm going with Jared Goff to go over his passing yards again because the Bucks and Lions, neither of them can defend the pass that well at all. They're actually both kind of ranked in around the bottom of the league in passing yards allowed, and both of these teams have really good rush defenses. And in an indoor Ford Field, I think this calls for a pass-heavy game, high-scoring, passing script. So I like both Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield to go over. They both went over last week. Both their overs are higher this week. Look at Baker Mayfield. I think his over-under was something like 236.5 last week. This week it's 260.5, but both of them I think will need to air it out a lot. So I like both of their overs. And to add a third leg, I think in a pass-heavy script, it would make sense to add a receiver. So I will go with Mike Evans. Well, I went back and forth between Mike Evans actually and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I just like Mike Evans' 71.5 receiving yards a little bit better because it's like 21 or 22 lower. Amon-Ra's is 93.5, I believe, for this week, somewhere around there. But yeah, I like Mike Evans to go over because last week he didn't, and sometimes Mike Evans can be a little bit boom or bust. He doesn't always consistently produce a ton of yards, but a lot of times when he has a down game or two, he's due for a bounce back. So like the last 2 games, he went below this. I think he's due to have 72 yards. Actually, the last 3 games, technically, he had below this over-under, but the game in Jacksonville, 4 games ago, he went over. I think he's due for an over. In this type of game, I believe he can hit this over. So that's my 3-leg parlay for Lions and Bucks. With 1 game left, we move on to what could shape up to be a classic between 2 generational quarterbacks, and that is, of course, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So what I like about Patrick Mahomes the most in his PrizePicks over-unders, I like his rushing yards. I like the over on his 28.5 because we've seen playoff Mahomes as a scrambler. This guy, I mean, he makes some big plays with his legs in the playoffs. This guy makes, game-winning type plays with his legs in the playoffs. He has before. Just like last week, he had 2 big runs against the Dolphins, I believe. He had 41 yards on maybe only 2 carries. So yeah, Patrick Mahomes, I think, will have a couple big scrambles and hit this over. I think he averages well over 28.5 rushing yards in his playoff career. So it seems like when the playoffs come around and Patrick Mahomes needs to will his team to victory sometimes, he usually goes over that rushing yardage total. So I like that. And then I like Josh Allen to go over his 22 projected fantasy score because Josh Allen is going to be so hyped up for this game. I think they're at home. Finally, Patrick Mahomes doesn't have to play, or Josh Allen doesn't have to go into Arrowhead to play Patrick Mahomes. He gets to host with Bills Mafia, the incredible fans they have. He's going to be hyped up. Josh Allen is going to probably make some incredible plays once again with his legs. He might score a rushing touchdown because he has scored a lot of rushing touchdowns this season. He's going to pass it a ton. I just think there's going to be a lot of volume there for Josh Allen. The weather shouldn't be too bad in Buffalo this week, at least compared to last week. So I think this will be the type of game where Josh Allen's gonna need to give everything he has, and I think he will get over 22 fantasy points. I mean, he's one of, if not the best fantasy QB. And I went back and forth with Travis Kelce and Stephon Diggs, like which pass catcher did I want to put in as the third leg of this parlay? And I ended up on Kelce because I believe in playoff Kelce. Like I said last week, I bet on him last week. His over-under is 63.5. He did get that last week. He got 71. So I think in a game where Patrick Mahomes is going to need to rely on his number one weapon, all reliable in Travis Kelce, I think Travis Kelce will get 64 receiving yards in this game. So that is my 3-leg parlay for our 4th game. So I did a 3-leg parlay for all 4 games of the divisional round. So let's see how these picks pan out. I didn't do great on my parlays last video for Super Wildcard Weekend. I think of those 6 parlays, only one of those game parlays hit. So I went 1 for 6 on parlays. Hopefully we go at least 1 for 4 because I believe the entry, whatever you put in, if it's the power play, which I like to do the power play, it's 5 times the output of the entry amount. So even if one of these 4 hit, I would be up. So let's just hope at least one of the 4, obviously hoping all of them hit. So guys, definitely let me know your opinions, your prize picks, if you're doing them for this divisional playoff weekend. Let's see how these picks do. Hopefully they go well. I'm going to definitely enjoy watching the games above all else. Hope you guys do as well, of course. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you love football, sports, you like doing some prize picks. This channel might be for you. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching, guys, as always, and I'll see you all in the next one.